Before we get into the actual exercises, let's make sure we're on the same page. So, many of you are probably going to ask, how come I don't start with a split squat? So a split squat is basically here, right? Looks very similar to a lunge, and it's totally a great exercise to utilize. However, just look at the name, split squat. So it's more of a squat variation because I'm not stepping and having directional movement. Secondly, I find that most people actually do better with a dynamic lunge because they have that moment where they're actually projecting themselves through space. That might seem like a very abstract idea until you actually do it, and you see that naturally, it's almost unnatural to stay here and go up and down versus pull myself up. Especially when you learn like what our intent is with a lot of the exercises. So when we teach lunging, and we've talked about this through the course so far, we like to work from the bottom up a lot of times, and a lot of that starts with any type of the half kneeling positions we've used throughout the lift program. So again, part of the reason that we're using half kneeling positions was it was a way to sort of trick your clients into lunging, because when I'm in half kneeling, I'm starting to learn some of the qualities of lunging, meaning grounding interaction by both feet, proper angles in my legs, and how to create core stability so I can move with more fluidity and confidence. Okay, so how do we start working from here? I'm not going to go through all the progressions, obviously, that we've done in some of the modules. So like, for example, a lot of the pressing exercises that we did from half kneeling would definitely have application to what we're doing here. So I'm just going to touch on a couple of them, just to give you guys a baseline of where we can go with things. So one of the most important things to start off with is, again, just making sure we're looking at right angles. What I mean is we want a vertical shin in the front foot, and we want a vertical thigh in the back leg. And you saw I just sort of adjusted myself because on the mat I was kind of out forward. A lot of people get in this half kneeling position, they're far too close with their foot, or they start to shift their position with their back leg, and they're out of position on both sides. So having those two positions are really important. Now, it's not because necessarily if my knee goes forward, my knee's going to pop off. That's not my concern with it. The reason I want you to be here is when I'm in this position, I press through both legs, I can really get glute and hamstring activation. If I start to shift and do it, I start to lose some of that glute activation. And remember, we're starting in hip flexion and moving into hip extension. That's just like what you would see in a lot of the hip hinges, especially like a deadlift. So again, we're just taking some of those fundamental movement concepts, applying them in a different position. So we want to have those right angles so we can integrate the right muscles. So one of the rules that we're going to use throughout this series is that whenever we can get core integration, you're going to move better. That goes back to that concept we use from PNF over and over again, because again, I don't think people really appreciate it, is that proximal stability creates distal mobility. Not just distal mobility, but I think better motor control as well. And especially in a lunge, since a lot of people have an inability with that frontal plane stability because of the change of the stance, that giving them more core stability is going to allow the hips to create more power because the spine is more stable. So just borrowing some of those concepts we've done earlier, we're going to start with the press out. And I want you to understand why we're using the press out. So again, we're bracing the core. We're integrating lat, core, glute chains. So again, being able to hold it by my belly button, pull apart, press out first. I want to press out first. A lot of people don't really understand this exercise. They press out and then come up, like an all-in-one motion. I'll show you the difference. And they're losing the fact that what the goal is to create that tension before I start moving. Creating that tension before I start moving allows me to create better success. If I do it as I'm moving, which is fine, but it's a completely different effect, I don't create that foundation, so I already have to have proficiency in the movement. So what I want to do is I want to begin by creating the tension. Now this actually feels much easier. I can take a rest by pulling it in, look on that my belly button, I'm not up on my chest, because I want to use the core, the lats, come down, and I have much better control of my hips versus being, okay? We're not doing some alternative thruster. What we're doing is trying to create a lot of tension from the ground, both in the way that I'm pushing through my feet to connect the core from the ground up, and then connect the core from my extremities down. So that I have this great foundation, so I feel very stable. And you have to communicate with the client, because when you give a client load in a lunge, they think you're trying to make it more difficult, when in reality, you're trying to make them more successful. So again, briefly being able to educate them, hey, better core activation means better hips, means better success in your lunge, will give you much more out of these exercises. So when we go through some of these different progressions, think about what we're trying to do in creating tension to help stability and control in the pelvis so that you control those different planes of motion. So what we're going to do now is we're going to use the press out in a couple of different mediums, meaning that I'm going to change how I actually perform the press out as well as the tools that I'm using. So one of the things that we touched upon in the pressing series is that I can use different patterns of press outs to create different effects. So what I'm going to do is actually use a rotational press out. So I'm rotating to almost like I'm sort of steering a car. Now the goal is not to turn it as much as humanly possible. If I do this, then I lose that lat connection. So I only want to think about a 45-degree angle. Now why would I do that? This goes back into those diagonal patterning. I get core tension, but I get a direct line of this shoulder, core, hip. All right? And when I'm doing it, I'm not just pressing out again, I'm actively trying to pull the weight apart. So again, it's about intent as much as it is the task of the action. If you don't have the proper intent, you won't get the results from the exercise. Now the great thing is that it can make a very light ultimate sandbag feel quite heavy. And why are we using ultimate sandbag? Because the hand and arm position we can get in makes it very friendly to go ahead and engage the lat. Plus the dynamic hand strength really lends itself to building that shoulder connection and being more successful. So I'm actually going to grab the bag itself because that tension out against the bag is going to give me better stability. So I'm pulling, and I've changed to a more horizontal position. Everything should look the same. Now what I'm going to think about is my left leg is forward. I should theoretically have my right arm come high. If you get this mixed up, you will not cause injury and you won't die. It just probably won't be as optimal as if you think about how our body is designed to move. So I want to remember, why am I doing it? Create that tension first, stand up, pull in, tension, I'm pulling apart, pull in, pulling apart, see I'm creating tension, pulling apart. This is actually pretty challenging because of all the tension I'm creating throughout my entire body. If I were to do this and then just put the bag down and go into a bodyweight lunge, this lunge actually feels way better because I've turned on a lot of those chains to help me move better. The nice thing is that it's building core shoulder integrity at the same time. Now, let's talk about different tools. I can bring in a lever bell. Why would I bring in a lever bell to do something kind of similar? Well, there's a couple reasons. One is that the weight's all on one side. So I don't have the ability to have the same stability as I might with a smaller ultimate sandbag. So you could view this as a progression because of the increased challenge. Secondly, you're going to find that because of the leverage, it's going to give you a different level of stability. So again, I'm going to have a different level of stability. You're going to have to see it's very different. So again, my foundation would probably use the bag. I progress it using the lever belt. Now, grip is important. I want to grip it in over-under. So under is closer by the knot because as I press in rotation, this is lat. A lot of people I see that use maces or lever bells, whatever you want to call them. If I go out and go here, now I'm into shoulder. So hand placement is something you really have to become aware of when you're using these tools properly. And again, I want to press from the belly button. I don't want to be up by my chest. This is shoulder, this is lat. So when I'm in that position again, I want to think about now, the closer my hands are and the further away the ball is, the more instability I have. So be modest at first, press out, rotate, come up, pull in, out, down, pull in. I'm still pushing through both of my feet, but I'm creating tension by trying to break the bar apart in both directions. I'm trying to pull this arm down and this arm in. So what you're seeing, and again, important to note, most people don't think of the lats as external rotators of the shoulder. They think of them as internal rotators. But if you simply place one hand underneath your underarm and turn your arm out, you feel the lats turn on. And if you think about the fibers running diagonally, it makes sense. So again, these are great ways to start building the foundation of the lunge because you're building that stability and strength at the same time, which will allow for more mobility and advancement over the series of exercises. So we can combine different tools, and this is not for novelty's sake. Whenever we combine different tools, we have to understand why are we combining them together. It's not just to look cool, it's not just to do something different, it's because the different tools do different things. So if I bring an ultimate sandbag up to a shoulder position, that is a higher and more challenging frontal plane stability pattern than holding a kettlebell in the rack position. Both do challenge asymmetrical loading, one side loading the body with frontal plane stability. But because the position of the weight, remember I get more core stability, I get more strength here because the weight's more anterior. Here it's directly pushing my body. I can combine both the elements to get a very unique training effect. So if I combine an ultimate sandbag on the shoulder and a kettlebell on the rack, number one, I get a little bit more bilateral loading. So if you're having clients that are having a hard time stabilizing in that frontal plane because of the asymmetrical loading of either just the kettlebell or just the ultimate sandbag, this is a nice way to create more tension and stability and build up progression, because when you don't have weight on one side, it's a lot more challenging than it looks. All right, and when we do this, we can start building off other progressions that I'll show you in a moment. But let's go over some of the baseline. So how do you get these different weights in position? I'm going to tell you, it takes a little trick and practice. So obviously, we're not probably going to be using massive weights when we do this initially. I'm going to bring the weight of my ultimate sandbag up first because it's going to go to the higher point. So I'm going to get that shoulder position, bring the weight up. Now, I'm going to I have to kind of squat because I have the weight upon my body, and bring the weight into the rack position. Now from here, what I want to think about is if this is the higher position, this is the one that I'm thinking about which leg is stepping back. So in this case, it'd be the left leg. So think about the side that has the bag on it, that side's going to go back. What am I doing here? Creating tension again, elbow in the ribs, pulling the elbow down. So when I step back, I plant, I move down, then I can transition. I can take a quick breath, reset, tension, press with the back foot, replant, remember airplane, or no, rocket in the airplane, and come back up. So let me do this again. Back, tension, relax just for a brief moment, but don't lose position. Don't let your hips sit back. I mean tension, relaxing the tension for a second. Re-engage tension, plant, rocket. Boom, right up. Now when I come back down, you probably want to bring the kettlebell down first, and then you can bring down your ultimate sandbag. It's a really cool way to use two different tools for two different purposes. Now, why didn't I put the kettlebell, let's say, in a rack position? It's logistics. I mean, I probably could do it, but because one leg's moving around, it's a little hard to do. It's generally better to put in the rack position. What I can do from there is come up with, again, similar to the arc press, a little different type of medium. So I can combine different movement patterns into a complex. So if I do it again, I'll bring the weight up to my opposite shoulder this time. And now, weight up. So now it'll be right leg go back. Right leg. Now, I can choose to come back here and do a tall kneeling press. 1, 2, maybe 3 reps at most. Come back, up, or I can work in 2 different presses. I can come down, half kneeling, stabilize, press through, press, transition, back leg, press, come back in, press, and work my way all the way up. So again, I'd probably sit down the bell first, and then the back. So once you have understanding of movement, you can come up with so many different exercises, but they're all purposeful exercises, right? Challenging the body different ways by using integrated movement patterns all at once. It's not just like, oh cool, I'm going to just rock through the exercise. It's understanding how I broke down and thought about what I was doing in each phase of the movement. And you can tell, this would have great carryover if you want to teach get-ups. But just in general, even if you don't, just understanding how to transition the body, how to be strong in more planes of motion at once, how to be fluid and change levels. So before we get into some of the other tools, I know inherently a question's going to come up of, does it really matter which leg is forward? In essence, it does. Does it make one different or better than the other? I don't know, that's really up for you to sort of decide. I'm trying to keep you consistent in the thought process. So if I come up in the drill here, if I lunge back like I've been showing you, the opposite, that will feel different than if I go same. So now if you wanted to make a correlation, if you wanted to say, hey, I want to build up max lunge, I want to build up some of these other exercises, I want to keep it to the same side as that stance leg, that's fine, that makes sense. But if we're using terms of just the functional patterning, I want to keep it, and this is actually feels a little bit more unstable because I don't have that stable support system on that opposite side. Hopefully that's making sense. Ultimately, you're going to find out that it's just very different, and until you do the movement, it won't be probably as impactful. All right, so let's talk about creating that tension. So this is where I love using lever bells. I think I mentioned it before, I'll mention it again. I like them way better than kettlebells to create tension and sort of that grip stability, and let's say a bottoms up position. Take it for what it's worth, having done this, I've done kettlebell since 2003. I just find that kettlebell bottoms up, they're not bad, they're just really hard to implement successfully. Does that make them bad? Maybe. This is much easier to get people to do well, and because I can change my hand position, I can be very high, I can be very low. It gives me lots of different ways to use the same weight and make it more challenging in a progressive manner. So what we're going to do before I actually show you the movement, it's that press out here. So what I'm going to do is every time I get ready to lunge, I'm going to use that little press out. So I'm creating that tension through the grip, shoulder, lat, and core. So let me show you the exercise. So if I'm going to try to be consistent and keep on the opposing side, I probably want to get the lever bell up first. I'm going to squat down, get my kettlebell, not my sandbag. Now, I want the weight in line with my belly button. I want to create that press out first, so I want that stability. I'm gripping the handle of the suitcase, coming down, and this is actually easier. I can rest for a moment, repress, grip tightly, drive back up. So you start getting a little bit of a rhythm through the movement. So the idea is I'm helping myself learn how to create tension and react to the instability of this ultimate sandbag by using that cross body tension. So some of you are probably going to ask though, hey, I don't have a lever bell, what can I do? Can I use a band? Yes, but it will be different, okay? So I can create some of that similar tension, but what I'm losing out on is the grip. And so whenever we can facilitate grip, it's going to be an added bonus. If you want to put a handle to this and you're saying you're using a handle when you're gripping, that's fine, but the instability of the lever bell makes me grip more. This is fine. It's probably not as powerful as what you're going to find with using a lever bell. All right? So again, just understanding differences and understanding what is that we ultimately want to achieve with a lot of these different movements. Having said that, the way we progress this is we could shorten the lever arm, but we can apply more load. So again, just like we talked about in pressing, ultimately, we're going to be limited to how much we can load because of this leverage position. And hopefully it's making sense that too, I think the other benefit of using this versus a lever bell press out versus a kettlebell bottoms up is due to the leverage, we get more core activation. You just feel the brace happen much faster. Now we can use kettlebells because we can use heavier loads to keep it close. So when I get close, I can create tension in the handle like we did before. And having this tension here, I can get nice and tight. So I can actually apply more load to the body, still building up strength, but also stability at the same time. And this feels much stronger than if I did without the kettlebell. But the key is to not lose sight of that both hands have to be active. As soon as you introduce a new variable, i.e. kettlebell, lever bell, people are going to become very fixated on that new load. You have to get them used to both weights, because if I lose that position of my suitcase handle, I will not be strong enough to stabilize myself in that frontal plane.